and pull it up on Facebook. Okay, yes, we are live. Great. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We are getting started. Let me make sure all of my yes. Okay, so we're live on YouTube and Facebook. Okay, great. So my name is Jasmine C.L. Baker. I am the owner of On Purpose Global Enterprises LLC, and this is the third annual Navigating a Motherless Mother's Day. I am so excited because when I started this 2 years ago during the pandemic, I kind of thought it was like gonna be a one-off thing. And then Holy Spirit was like, nah, fam. And I was like, oh, okay. So, so this is the third year doing it. The first year was really small, was intimate. People had to register. It was only on Zoom, probably because I was really nervous too. But so it was real small. Last year I opened it up and it was on Facebook and I had a guest. And then this year, I am very excited because we have a whole panel. So the reason why I believe it shifted to a panel view this year is because people need to understand that they are not alone when it comes to grieving and just loss in general. It's a taboo topic. It should not be. So people need to understand that however you're feeling during this holiday, you're allowed to feel it, and you're not the only person who could be feeling like that. So it's not just going to be me and my story. You're going to hear from all of us tonight on just our journeys with not having our moms. Some of us had our moms at some point. Some of us did not have our moms at one point. So just our stories, how we are now, our journeys, what this holiday looks like for us. And then the nitty gritty of it is really just hoping that y'all understand some things about the holiday and how we process through it and things like that. So a little bit about my business. I am a purpose restoration and recovery coach that specializes in grief and loss. So what I do is I help women process through any and all types of grief or any and all types of loss that results in grief, and then help them realize that just because we experience a traumatic loss does not mean that Holy Spirit changed his mind about us. So helping them get back on track to doing what it is that he called us to do, because he already knew it was going to happen in the first place. So he's going to equip us to get through it, but understanding that this new normal, what that looks like and how our purpose ties into it. So that is what I do. For any of you who have been following me for any amount of time, I lost my mom. It'll be 10 years this year. So this is my 9th Mother's Day without her. It'll be 10 years in October. And that was kind of my first like big death grief. I had other losses that I experienced, but that was the biggest like death one that hit me. And I can distinctly remember the first Mother's Day after, because she died in October. So that first Mother's Day, I was still kind of numb, like floating through, trying to figure out what life was. And so I went to church just because we were supposed to go to church. It's what you do. And I was like very heavily active in ministry. So I'm like, I'm just going to go, whatever. But we know that in the Black church, Mother's Day is a really big deal, like really big deal. And so I wasn't prepared to be triggered on Mother's Day in church. And I broke down. I'm like, oh, this probably wasn't a good idea. But I just, nobody tells you about triggers. Nobody tells you about, taking time and things like that. So I just kind of floated through and was on autopilot, and it smacked me in the face. So the second year comes around and I was planned on going to church again. But I woke up and I was just anxiety hit me so hard. And so my roommate at the time, she was like, okay, so let's just not go. And I was like, wait, we can do that. Because we get so programmed into, I have to be there, I have to serve, I have to do, that we don't give ourselves time to grieve. And then we feel like other people also don't give us that time to breathe. So she was like, we'll just stay home. And I was like, oh, I can do that. So I stayed home, and I needed to stay home. However, this is one of my things I wish people understood. Because I'm thinking, I'm giving myself time that I needed and staying home. And I'm thinking that should be an automatic, people will understand that. But they didn't. So church is over and I'm getting people calling me and texting me like, hey, you weren't there. What's going on? I kind of would think that you would understand it's Mother's Day. Her mom died. That's why she's not there. But they didn't get it. It's quick. Okay, no problem. So let me explain. it's Mother's Day and my mom died. So, I didn't really want to come. That's a good explanation, right? No. Well, you should still come to church. Church is the place you should be. I lost my mom too, and I'm still here. That's those are the responses that I got. So from that, I'm like, this is where this conversation kind of came from. Like, things we wish were understood around, not only Mother's Day, but just not having your mother, period, or any type of loss you go through. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell of my story, and how we got to this particular event of this annual discussion. So yeah, we're gonna kick it off. I'm gonna let my awesome panelists introduce themselves, give a little bit about their stories, however they see fit.
All right. Hey, everybody. Everybody was quiet. So I was like, well, let me go ahead and just jump in here. So my name is Sabrina L Donegan. I am an author, a life coach, and a speaker. So I have over 12 years working in mental health crisis management, as well as higher ed administrator, and also leadership coaching. So I work with individuals to help them live a life of gratitude after grief and trauma. So my story, I often tell people that the year that I achieved my greatest accomplishment was also the year that I had my greatest tragedy. In 2018, my mother passed away pretty suddenly. I had released my first book in March, and then my mom passed in June. So it was like, and then I transitioned to a whole nother city in like April, right? So it was a lot going on. But 3 years before that, I had lost my father. And then 17 years before that, my sister had drowned at a party that we both were at. So I saw her drown at a party. So my mom wasn't my first experience with grief, but I would say that was the ultimate sort of kind of foundation shattering event for me. I relate to my mom as the person who built up my faith foundation. I'm a believer in God and Jesus Christ. And that was the person who taught me about God, who taught me about Jesus. And so when she passed away, that foundation was destroyed. That foundation was kind of fragile, already because of all of the other traumas and things that I had experienced. But to know that the person who loved God the most in my entire life was now gone, I didn't really understand that concept. So I struggled with my faith for a while after that, just really struggling, trying to figure out this whole God thing. Like, God, where are you? Who are you? What are you doing? What's going on? Why did this happen? What does this mean? Why is this relevant? All of these different things. And so, through a lot of intense therapy, eventually getting back into my prayer life and being able to just be surrounded by so much support from family and friends, I've been able to get to a place that I feel is a place of gratitude, even though I'm still grieving. And just a transparent moment, my mom's birthday is Monday, and I felt super depressed today, right? And I just didn't understand what was going on. I woke up just really feeling depressed and went for a walk. And then when I got home, I just busted out crying. And I was just like, oh my God, like, it's almost Mother's Day and it's almost her birthday. So this is why you're feeling this way. So I would say for people, what I hope that people understand, one, that it's not personal. Like, if we need time to ourselves, if we say things that may be out of the ordinary or say things that aren't normal in your version of normal, that is not personal to you. Like, how we deal with our grief is really a process. It's not something that, somebody loses someone and then they go through the funeral, and then they're over, they're back to their normal selves. Like, no, it's a process, it's a journey. And so however I choose to deal with that and however I choose to relate to that, it's nothing personal against you, but it's really my opportunity to work through my issues. And so I would say also too, like, don't make it about you. Like, I think Jasmine just shared, she said somebody was like, oh, I lost my mom too, and I came to church. Well, that may be how you grieved, right? Going to church may have been helpful for you, but it's not helpful for me. Okay. So leave me alone and let me do what I want to do. If I don't want to go to church and see them get the flowers or the roses to the mama, or call everybody mama had a little kids do a speech, that mean I don't want to do that. Right. It's okay. Like, so I think, just people understanding that everybody's journey is different. And that doesn't mean that I'm comparing mine to yours, but that mine is different. So let me kind of go through it the way that I choose to. So that would be my tablet.
Yes, and I love the everybody's journey and everybody's grief is different. It is. I say all the time, grieving does not equate to a lack of faith, right? So just because I'm expressing my grief, just because I'm down one day, just because I am depressed and I need therapy and I may need antidepressants or whatever it is, I'm still safe. I still love Jesus. We still have a relationship. You're not going to feel like I don't have a relationship with him because, I'm human. Like grief does not just totally negate the fact that I'm human. Jesus didn't even do that himself, but that's a whole nother soapbox tangent that I won't get on yet. But that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Yeah. Okay.
Hi guys, my name is Shanika Stokes. I am a grief coach as well as a baker. I became a grief coach after losing my mom. I lost my mom in 2013 to a sickness called Chiari malformation. And before that, in 99, I lost my dad to gun violence. So my dad's death was my first experience with like a close grief. But I never realized how his death affected me until after my mom passed away. So when my mom passed away, I felt like I was grieving both of them at the same time. I went through a phase of being angry at God. I stopped praying. I started reading my Bible. I wasn't going to church. The one time I did go to church after my mom passed away, like walking in just felt weird to me because that's where her funeral was. So I was just like, I just don't want to be here. And I think the other thing with it was I didn't feel supported from church like when I was dealing with my grief. So that was probably another reason why I just stopped going to church. But me and God was definitely on the outs. We were not friends. I literally wanted nothing to do with him like at all. And I was just in a really like dark space. But my first question to him when my mom passed away was, why would you take my mom and you know that I don't have my dad? Like I was really beefing with God. And like I lost a lot of friends during that time. People didn't understand. Like the depression was real, anxiety was real. I feel like losing my mom caused me to kind of like cling to other people to make sure that I don't lose them. Um, but it was really challenging. I'm the oldest of three. My youngest brother was still in high school, and I was the only person that he felt like he could lean on. So not only did I lose my mom, I had to plan the funeral because my grandparents were just out of it. And like it kind of caused me to put my grief on the back burner. And nobody understood that. It was just like, all right, it's months later. Like you should be back to work. You should be back to doing everything else that you would normally do. Like, why you don't smile no more? Why you just look so sad? Like, I just lost my mother. Like you don't understand that. And to me it was just like I feel like you why is that so hard for you to understand? And like for I had a friend and I was just like, are you kind of like slow? Like you don't understand like what's going on. But she was really adamant about her marriage during that time and wanting me to be in a wedding. And I declined because I knew I would be a crappy bridesmaid because I wasn't in the mindset to do it. So um my first Mother's Day without my mom was very, very hard. I remember just sitting around, not really like doing anything. I kind of felt numb. And to be completely honest, like the second, maybe third year, like I was okay. But I was telling my husband, like this year, I feel like heavy. Like I'm not looking forward to Sunday. Like I feel like it's just going to be another day. But just going through that dark phase, and like eventually I started like working on my relationship with God again. Went back to church, but I too avoided church on Mother's Day. Like I didn't want to go. My grandmother would get upset, but I'm like, she'll be fine. Like she doesn't understand. Like I'm not going. It has nothing to do with me. But just going through it, therapy, talking about it, acknowledging my like emotions, and like just understanding that grief is an everyday battle, I feel like is what is helping me to even like maneuver and maintain like now. So yeah, that was my experience of like losing my mom and what I wish people would understand.
All right, how you guys doing? I'm Cameron. I'm a chef here in South Bend, Indiana. I lost my mom back in 2018 to renal kidney failure and COPD. And around the time that her health started really declining, I met my fiance, and that was kind of something big for me at the time. And knowing how special this kind of union for me, my mom kind of always wanted that for me, and I know that me experiencing this brought her joy. But the whole time, she's declining fast in health. She had been living with it since since probably maybe 8th grade. So for her to live that long, they told her she wouldn't live for me to even see high school. She beat that. They told her she wouldn't get a kidney. She got a kidney. She beat that. But it started to fail. So all my hopes got up, my whole family, me and my father, our hopes got up for her to get this kidney and have a long lasting life without dialysis and having to go to all these multiple surgeries and doctor's appointments. And it kind of came crashing down, and we really didn't know how to deal with it. And my father's an alcoholic. So dealing with him and that, and with all this going on, and then my own outside, and I'm 27 when she passed. So dealing with the trauma of all the times we had to go to the hospital, all these different experiences, and then to still have the trauma with my dad being an alcoholic. I don't know if I've actually had time to grieve. Listening to all, the stories that I've heard, so far, I don't really think I've actually really had time to sit and process, everything about and around my mother's death. Me and my dad's relationship is getting better. We've had a rocky relationship because of alcohol, and it makes it hard because he still stays in the house with all my mother's things and all my mother's pictures. And I want to go and I want to be there because I want to be in the essence of my mother, because like I said, I really don't think I've actually had time to grieve. I don't really have any knowledge if I'm grieving or not. But I know it's hard to deal with, especially around Mother's Day, with a father who's hurting too. This is the love of his life. They were married 38 years. And, to watch him go through that, I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to do. So I'm still left to process this because this is an everyday thing for me. I still have to interact. Even though this is a tragic story, kind of, I'm having my first child, and they're coming June, the first week of June. And ironically, she passed June 8th. So they were set. Yeah, we're set to be due June 9th. So, woo, I'm excited. But, it's even that is a little sad because my mother really wanted some grandkids, and now I gave them to her, and she's not physically here to see them. And having to process all this is a lot because this is a lot for me. I never really thought or think I've had time to grieve. Like you guys said, it's back to work. It's back to the grind. After she passed, I went hard. I started in community outreach, working with the city of South Bend with Department of Community Investment, where I created programs to help inner city youth channel anger and aggression, depression through music. So I teach them how to record. If they want to rap, they can come rap. If they want to come make beats, it's a safe spot. And I just went really hard with that and kind of masked the pain of everything. and Max the fact that I have to deal with this every day. So if I could let anybody who's listening understand, if I can let you know what to understand for me personally about Mother's Day, is that I have to be alone. That's not really a day that I can interact publicly. And I don't know if it's like that for everybody, but I'm not usually introverted like that. I'm usually a bubbly spirit. I'm out here, I'm talkative, I'm nice. That day I got to shut it down. I can't go nowhere. You know what I'm saying? TV on, maybe TV on, maybe TV's watching me. But the first Mother's Day without my mother was unbearable. And a lot of days are unbearable. But, we still press on. I gotta go. I gotta go on for my family, and I gotta go on for my life. So it's different. But yeah, for me personally, and people like me who have not yet really come to terms with everything that happens, we need to be left alone. At least, for me personally, people like me, we need to be left alone. But yeah, that's my time.
Oh, okay. I'll go. I'm Brittany Davis. I'm an author and a spoken word artist. My mother actually passed away when I was 3 months old, and so my grief journey has been different. I would say that it's been hard, going through school and things like that, and having people make Mother's Day cards and things like that, and me like writing them to my grandmother or even my father. My father raised me. We mentioned church, and so in my home church growing up, you would have a red rose, if your mother was living, I think, and a white rose, if your mother had passed away. Well, my dad and my grandmother would give me a white rose with specks of red, to represent, the people in my life that were mother figures. And so my biggest frustration growing up was people telling me about all the great things about my mom. And I'm like, well, that's great, but I wish I could have met her for myself. I wish I could have experienced that for myself. I think my grief journey really started when I became an adult, because at that point I was exhausted from texting everybody Happy Mother's Day on Mother's Day to be respectful. Like, you're supposed to respect your elders. You're supposed to respect those who have tried to play that part in your life. There was a sermon that I was listening to, and he referenced a book. I think it's called It Didn't Start With You. And it really was like a light bulb, because in the book he talks about how there was a point where him and his mother had separated at 3 months of age, and how psychologically for a baby that triggers something in them, because that's like your main source of nutrients and nurturing. And so I was like, oh, it makes sense that, I've been this way my whole life, as far as like detaching from, like older women, or like being kind of like cold and like internalizing things. It's not just me being an introvert. And so me being able to process that has been helpful. But what I wish people understood is that, just because I lost my mom at an early age, it doesn't mean, that I don't grieve Mother's Day. And so I think that is huge for me, because now I've been able to, take a step back. Like, I'm not going to text 15 people on Mother's Day, because it's been 32 years of that. So if I don't get to you until 8:00, I'm sorry. But that's just something that I have to do for my own mental health. Not only that, but like me processing being a mother myself now, and not having my mother there like so many other people have had. Like, that's something that I had to process last year, and that I'm going to have to process this year. And so that is my story.
Hey y'all, my name is Kara Monique, and I was kind of waiting my turn, and the reason being, I believe I'm the baby of grief in a sense on this. My mom died in June of last year, so it hasn't even been a whole year. This is actually my first Mother's Day without my mom. And one of the things I just want to share before I even share my story is I feel like I'm navigating my grief journey in a unique way. It shocks me to be completely honest. My mother and I were very, very close. But I find so much peace and so much solace in knowing that other folks who have experienced this, we experience so many similarities, even though all of our grief journeys are so different. And I say that because at least 3 of you on this call, I know for a fact, have lost both your mother and your father. So did I. I lost my dad too. Actually, he was killed by the police when I don't even remember him. I was so young. And then I lost my mom last year. So my mom dying actually brought up the fact that I never had a dad for me. But it's those things, it's in the stories of our stories of grief. It's in our stories of sharing that I actually get to say, oh, someone else actually knows how this feels. And not that I want people to experience it, but it brings something different to it's okay to still exist. And I'm not saying like I don't want to exist, but just that like, okay, you can go on. You can still get up and do this. You can still get up and do that. You are not the only one that knows what it feels like to not have parents at all, but in particular, mom. So much like Cameron, my mom, one of her causes of death was renal failure, kidney failure. But it really was septic. She became septic. She got an infection in her blood. My mom was actually living with kidney failure for we don't know how long, because the thing about kidney failure is some people function very high, don't know. Some people go to the doctor and they have to go immediately to dialysis. My mom was one of those people who functioned very high. Her numbers didn't show any kind of anything until about 10 days before she was actually admitted to the hospital. And my mom was admitted to the hospital, had to go on immediate dialysis. She fell. If you know anything about dialysis, they put a catheter in like a stent in the arm that has to mature. While that was maturing, they put the catheter in her chest. Somehow the catheter in her chest became infected, and the infection got into her blood, and they could not find the source of the infection. And my mom actually, she died fairly quick to have been completely healthy in our mind to not really, it took 3 months. She went into the hospital in April. So April was a very tough month for me this past April, because all of those emotions came back from me remembering that's the last time I saw my mom outside of the hospital, to now I'm in this stage now of this time last year, I was back and forth, and I lived 2.5 hours from my mom. So I was driving back and forth every few days, going back and forth to the hospital. So that's where my mind has been the last couple of weeks. So anyway, my mom in the hospital, I was a huge advocate for my mom. And I believe, and Brittany's shaking her head because Brittany knows me, and Brittany saw this. My journey was I lived very out loud when my mom was in the hospital. And that gave me so much peace, because I saw my mom's body turn on her. And when I say turn, it's unimaginable when you see someone get as sick as my mom got. I watched her body change. So I believe, I'm a woman of faith. I really believe God showed me how she was feeling out in an outward expression, so that when he took her home, I would understand why. So do I miss my mom? Absolutely. But I'll tell anyone to this day, I don't want my mom back. And the reason being is because my mom deserved to live in a body that loved her back. And I felt like her body was tired. And if her body was tired, she shouldn't have lived in pain. And that's literally, my mom was living in so much pain in the last span of the 3 months of her life. So I found a lot of healing in my mom's passing. Actually, I've done nothing but celebrate my mom since she passed. But I also like to tell people I'm a baby in grief as well. We know grief comes in waves and stages. So I've had days where literally I couldn't get out the bed and I sat and cried. But I've had so many days where all I do is find so much joy in how great my mom was. My mom was a teacher. She taught for 38 years. And the impact, my mom taught thousands of children. My mom had a really big funeral, like even in a year of COVID. It just really showed the kind of impact my mom had. And I do believe that has helped me in my grief process of knowing my mom lived such a good life. that has helped me to find a lot of peace as well. I have no idea how I'm going to feel on Mother's Day this year, but one of my mom's favorite things to do was to serve others. That was just who she was in her personality. So I am actually in the fashion space. I'm a shoe designer. I own a women's footwear store, but there's a Mother's Day fashion show actually in my city this Sunday. So I've been working with the coordinators of that fashion show. So on Mother's Day, I am actually going to spend my day at a fashion show, like behind the scenes and all of that. But they are actually honoring my mom, like on the screen and all of that. So that's how I'm going to spend my day. And I'm totally okay with that. I might be frowning and sad. I don't know, but I'm going to be in a space that both of us loved, me in fashion and her loving to serve others. So that's really healing and exciting for me. And then the other piece that I want to kind of share too is that my mom was like literally my biggest supporter. My friends knew my mom, like everyone knew my mom. And for me, one of the things that I was really blessed to experience when my mom passed away is a surrounding of love, and it has not stopped. So I think, and part of it, I think people are checking on me because they like, are you really this okay? I think I'm scaring a lot of people. And I've heard some of my friends have said that too. Like, are you sure you're okay? Because oftentimes the only experience with grief people have ever seen is people falling completely apart, which is also okay. So I think I really thank God that he is allowing me to grieve in a different way, because people, I've found so many people who have never, ever experienced someone who had the relationship I had with my mom, who also has not fallen apart. And then much like Sabrina, last year was the biggest year of my life. Me and my mom are actually 6 days apart. Our birthdays are in June. My mom also died in June. My brother got married the week my mom died. And his wedding reception was less than 24 hours after she passed. So we had to get up and put on face. And that was really tough because but the Bible says a man should leave his mother and cleave to his wife. So I feel like my brother got married in the nick of time. God sent his wife right at the time that he knew mom was going to go. But me and my mom just shared so many things. So like June is going to be coming around very soon, and being able to celebrate my birthday, her birthday, my brother's wedding, and her death anniversary. I'm actually looking forward to a month of celebrating. So what I would say for those that, for me, I love being surrounded by love. I love that my mother's memory has not died. That's what really helps me. So being alone, it are the moments that are a little bit tougher. Being an entrepreneur, I spend a lot of time alone. So when there are opportunities to be with other people and celebrate them or whatever, that refreshes me because it reminds me of who my mom was. And I'm gonna be quiet now.
Okay. Thank y'all all for sharing y'all's stories. I think what was refreshing for me is I think Kara brought this up, just about the similarities of everybody's journeys, even though some of us know each other. Not everybody knows each other. No grief journey is the same. Even though we all lost our mom, none of our stories are exactly the same. None of us handled her death in the exact same way. And I think that's something that, for me, that I need people to understand, is that even though you have the same loss as someone, it does not mean that y'all are going to handle it the same way. And that has to be okay. I think Sabrina mentioned this before too. The way people handle grief is the way that they need to handle grief. And Kara said this too, like, she's not sad all the time. That is okay. And people need, not saying anything against people who said anything, I'm just reiterating, we have to be okay to allow her to be okay in her space. Because if we try to project how we think she should grieve onto her, then that might make her fall into a space that she doesn't even need to be in when she's already healthy. We try to, oftentimes, because we don't talk about grief, we do a lot of projecting. When if I was as close to my mom and she was to hers, I would be, just broken down. Then now she's looking at herself like, well, maybe I should be, not saying you would, but that could put somebody in a place like, maybe I should X, Y, and Z. And she was perfectly fine, but because we thought she should have done it a certain way, now we've projected and it just turned into something else. So I would like people to, and if y'all can get something else, y'all would like people to understand as well. that nobody's journey looks the same, and it's not supposed to. It shouldn't. There's no blueprint for grief. Yes, we know that, grief comes in waves and cycles, and we know all the stages of grief and all of that. But even in that, it's not linear. It doesn't happen in any distinct pattern. We find one day, find a minute, and then totally break down. I had a breakdown watching a movie because people don't even tell us about triggers. Like, literally, I was watching, it was a show on Netflix. I think I made a whole status about it. Y'all, it was a whole breakdown, like, for real. Because my mom said too, I still don't even remember the name of it because I had never heard of it before. But it was something with her lungs. She had gotten pneumonia, and the pneumonia turned to bronchitis, and then the bronchitis turned into something else. She had to be on oxygen and inhalers and all this other type of stuff. She couldn't breathe. So she had lost so much weight and stuff that she was just really weak. So the only place that she felt good was in the bathtub. So, but her getting into the bathtub was this whole thing. So me being 16 had to pick my mom up and physically put her in the tub. So I'm watching pieces of her, and it's a scene where her daughter is like bathing her in the tub, and y'all, I fell all the way apart, because that triggered me, because in my mind, I'm 16 again, picking my mom up, putting her in the tub. But if people don't understand that grief comes in waves, somebody could look at me like, girl, you 32. That was 16 years ago. Why is that bringing up tears now? Because grief, there's no ending point. It doesn't stop at any moment. Like, any trigger, anything can come up and you just be a ball of tears. Or triggers can bring about a happy memory. Like, triggers aren't always negative. But the point of it being is, people's grief is people's grief. People's reactions are people's reactions. And we have to be willing to be uncomfortable in how somebody's grieving, because it's not about us in the first place. So I can't look at you and say, oh, you should be X, Y, and Z, because since you're not, now I'm uncomfortable. Well, it's not about you. It's really not. It's not your loss. Even if it is your loss, like, even if it's my sibling, we both lost our mom, but her journey is, I have 3 siblings. We all lost the same mom, but none of us went through it the same way. And I can't tell my sister that she needed to do X, Y, and Z because I'm not. And why you all on Facebook and I didn't put it on Facebook? Well, that's her process, and that's what she needs to do. So that's something that I would say. People just need to be left alone to grieve, need to grieve, and people be supportive of what that looks like. So we can go around maybe the order we are on the screen and give another thing that we would like people to understand about grief and what that looks like, or anything like that.
I think I'm next if we're all seeing the same screen. So another thing that I would like people to really know is that, just on a personal note, just because I'm married, just because I live a good life, I don't want to necessarily be a mom. Like, people are like, there's so much pressure around, oh my God, your mom wanted grandkids and you didn't give her grandkids. And now, like, it's time. Like, and I'm like, I just lost my mom and people are still putting pressure on me around being a mom. And I'm like, I'm still processing the fact that I no longer have a physical mom, and y'all want me to be a mom. Like, be okay with one staying out of people's wombs in general, but really around, I feel like when my mom died, so many folks were really like, oh my God, now how do you feel? Because some people already kind of knew where I was with kind of like straddling the fence on like timing of when I might want to have a kid or whatever. But when my mom died, people think babies are healing. That conversation came up so much where folks we're like, well, you just need something to love. Like, your mom would be so happy if you gave her a grandbaby. And I'm like, my mom did. And I'm like, even being a spiritual person, I'm like, I know my mom in heaven. I said, but my mom ain't finna hold this baby. When that baby crying at night, my mama ain't coming down here to change that baby's name. But that became so real. And I know that's not everybody's experience, but for me, that became a very real thing, because people were expecting it when I got married. And then I didn't have a baby as soon as I got married. And people knew, I was having this conversation with my mom and other women about, because I'm in these circles around maternal health and all this. And people just started to really project this idea of like, grow your family now. Like, this is the time to do it. And I'm like, that's such a big decision. So don't encourage people to make life-altering decisions because you think it's going to heal them in a certain way. And for me, that has been conversations around growing my family. And that's not real healthy for me right now. So.
I would say for people who have, I guess, children around them who have lost their mothers, I would say don't try to fill the void. It is impossible. It's absolutely impossible to fill that void of someone's mother. And for me, I think I would tell the people around me who might have difficulty, understanding how I navigate Mother's Day, is I guess don't like sweep it under the rug if just because like I'm not saying something, like I'm processing. And then I'm glad that Care brought up that point about motherhood, because for me transitioning into motherhood, I don't like to be called mama by other people. I've never called anybody mom. And so for me, like that's triggering because I feel like I'm only a mother to one person and I'm trying to navigate that space and maintain my identity. And so I've recognized that a part of me being so angry when people call me that, it has to do, with me losing my mother and processing it and never having called anybody mother and trying to navigate this space of motherhood that I've never seen, played out in my own life. So that's what I would add.
That's good. Cam?
All right. One thing I could probably say about for me personally, if I do anything else on that day or around that day, that doesn't mean I've forgotten my mother. That doesn't mean that I don't know what other headspace somebody might think, but I know for me right now, doing things that I like and living for me right now and trying to find a place where I can breathe and be healthy and figure out my feelings about what's happened. That just doesn't mean that I've forgotten my mother. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean I'm shut down from the people who are around me trying to be my support either. And I know sometimes people look, well, you're not going to go check on your dad. You're not going to do nothing. Me and my dad talk. You know what I'm saying? We have our little system around these holidays. I don't always need to go over there, especially when it's just a bunch of pictures of my mom smiling. So, it's for me, like I said, if I do anything else, it doesn't mean that I'm bitter or I'm mad or I've forgotten. It's just I have to process, and I don't think I've properly done that yet. So that's all for me.
Well, first, Karen Monique said something that eventually I got to that stage with my mom, with her being sick and her having like a bunch of different surgeries. My mom started her battle in 2016. So I was 16 taking care of my mom because she got sick. She had to learn to walk again and all that stuff. So you said, I don't want my mom back. So after realizing like everything that my mom was going through, all the medicine she had to take, how she was in and out of the doctors, like I felt like it was selfish for me to want her back. But to know that my mom was also a believer in Jesus Christ and she knew that when she went, she was going to be good. And my hope is like, what brings me peace with the situation is knowing that I'm going to see my mom again when I leave here and she's going to be altogether better. So that really stuck out to me. And like when I got there to that point, I was okay. I felt like that was my stage of acceptance with, her death. But some things that I would want people to also understand is that going through grief sometimes can change you. Like sometimes you're not the same person. You're now trying to figure out how to navigate through your new norm. Like life as I knew it before is completely different. Like the person that was in my corner all the time, who used to call my phone. My mom always called my phone. She was a very loud person. She was full of life, even up until the day she passed away. Like that was just her. So to not have that, even on my birthday, like to call me at 12 o'clock, knowing that I'm probably asleep, like that stuff, like it makes you miss them, but I wouldn't want her to come back and like struggle like that. But also understand, like, I don't have that anymore, so I'm navigating through this. So I'm not the person that I was before my mom passed away. And another thing is, I'm not going to grieve to make you comfortable. So if you are uncomfortable with how I'm dealing with my loss, I have nothing to give. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to fake my emotions. I'm not going to fake anything just because you're just like, I'm uncomfortable. Like, can you be okay? Yeah, no. The other thing is, be mindful of, like, if you were married before your mom passed away, that is great. But if you are somebody who's getting married after your mom passes away, people need to be mindful of the wedding process. Be mindful of, like, the feelings and the emotions that'll come from, like, I'm really about to take this big step and my mom's not going to be here. Going to look for your dress, just anything, connected to your wedding is going to be a challenge. And for me, I got married in 2020, smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. So that was one of the biggest hurdles for me. And nobody understood. Like, nobody got it. So I feel like that stuff right there is stuff that people have to be mindful of. Even when it comes down to having kids, my mom's not going to be here. Like Cameron said, she not leaving heaven to come see her grandkids. My brother had 3 kids after my mom passed away. She ain't coming to see them. She ain't coming to see mine either. So don't rush me to become a mom just because my mom's not here. So that is what I wish, like, people would understand. Stop applying unnecessary pressure.
You all have said some really, really good things, and y'all see me shaking my head because I'm like, yes, that's me, sis, bro. That's me. So I love it. Very close to what Shamika said. Like, one of the biggest things that I would say is that I'm not the same person I was before. That was one of the very first I think things that really became clear to me, that I was a completely different person. Like, there's growth in grief, so you may be one person when you experience the grief at the first time. And then depending on how the situation was, you could have been expecting it. It could have been sudden. It could have not been sudden, and so you have this process that you go through. And there's growth in that. So, I think I said before, I was really upset. I was mad. I was angry. I went through a whole year of anger. And now I'm not in that place anymore. I'm at a different place. So my grief has grown to a different level. And that's okay. And that's good, because now I'm like where Cara Monique is, where I'm like, child, Courtney wouldn't want to come back even if I asked her to, honey. She like, yes, baby, I'm living this life, okay? And I love that, because one of the things that I feel like I've been able to experience is I've had some sweet, sweet, sweet dreams with my mom and God, and that has brought me so much comfort, so much joy, so much peace, just to know that, she is where she preached about, what she talked to us about, what she lived. And she was a woman of service too, and she served other people. And just to know that everything that she gave out to other people, she's now getting back tenfold, 100-fold. So I'm not the same person I was. And people respecting the growth in me and respecting the growth in my grief. So when I was, first experiencing it, I may have wanted to punch a hole in the wall or a hole in somebody. I'm not there no more. I don't want to necessarily punch a hole in the wall or a hole in somebody. I may just want to go outside and stand in the rain and enjoy, the fresh air on my face and doing those different things. And I would also say the other thing is, I spoke at an event earlier this week, and I said that grief shows you the areas in your life that needs to be refined. And so there were things that came up, when I was going through my grief journey about me, that caused me to change, right? And so when I say, hey, I'm not that person anymore, respect that. So respect who we are and who we're growing to be and the places that we want to do. And then there's a purpose. You know, I have a purpose. We all have a purpose. And our grief has magnified what that purpose is for us. And so if you see us making moves that don't look like something you would do, don't worry about it. We still dealing with our process, but we also making these moves. So it's okay. Don't feel like we still not grieving. We still not dealing with our losses, but we also decided that we were going to live on purpose as well.
Come through with the live on purpose with the on purpose. Okay, I see you, sis. Period. Okay, so we're almost at an hour, so I'm gonna do one more question and then we're gonna wrap up. Because I think most of us have said to some degree that we're believers, and then how like the church has impacted our grief journeys. So, two-part question. First part is, do you feel like the church over spiritualizes grief? And if so, what's one thing that you wish the church specifically understood about grief, or how the church can help their members process through grief? If that makes sense. Okay, go ahead, Shamika.
So before I answer that, Sabrina, you said something. You said grief causes you to grow. And I've been reading this book. It's literally called Grief. I can share it later after this is over. But this lady is writing and she says, it's a Christian-based book too. And she says, losing, I think it's her husband or somebody like that. She says, it makes you look at life like, if I was to go today or tomorrow, have I fulfilled, everything that I wanted to do? And so you just saying that, like, it made me think of that, because like you said, like, we're making moves differently now. We're looking at life differently now. So I just thought that was really cool that you brought that up, and it made me think of that. But to answer your question about the church, for sure they do. I feel like they make it seem like if you're grieving, you're lacking faith. And this is just from my experience. And it's not true, because grief is a form of love. You love that person. So of course you're going to be sad because that person's not here. Yes, you lean on the fact that you have a relationship with God and you know him for yourself, and you're going to see that person again. But also don't try to belittle me or my, relationship with God or my faith in God because of how I'm maneuvering through my grief. So I feel like the church needs to do a better job with acknowledging the fact that grief is normal, acknowledging that it's a lot of things that come with grief that we have to learn how to deal with. If you face depression because you lost somebody, that does not mean you lack faith in God. If you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with anxiety, it's not because you lack faith in God and you're not battling a demon. Like, it's literally something that's coming with the fact that I just lost my mom. And so, like, when it comes down to that, I feel like that's where the church kind of drops the ball, because everything is, oh, you don't have faith in God. Oh, you're not believing in God. You're not, like, I am, but God also gave me emotions. And these are the emotions that's coming with the fact that I no longer have my mom. And I feel like because they do that, a lot of people turn from the church when they're going through that. So that's my input on that.
I would agree. I would say that the church does, in a way, over spiritualize grief. I also feel that a lot of people are insensitive in the church when it comes to grief, because we haven't been taught how to process our emotions a lot of time. We haven't been taught how our faith and our grief can coexist. Luckily, I did have a pastor who told me, he said, you're trying to get over something that you don't get over. You have to get through it. You have to go through it. And I always, thank God for that. But I do believe that a lot of people in the church can be insensitive and selfish. I remember someone asked me to do a Mother's Day poem, and I'm like, do you realize I have no context for that? And just because I have the gift does not mean that, you can use my gift and, it's just insensitive. So I think that they can over spiritualize it, and we can be insensitive to people's process in their grief.
I agree a lot with what Brittany just said as well. I do, and also Shamika said it. I do think in a lot of churches it's over spiritualized. But one of the things I can definitely say, and it could have been because I lost my mom kind of during the pandemic, in a sense, like we had opened up quite a bit. But one of the things that I realized, especially in the Black church, I realized there's no support for Black folks to grieve. I joined a group called Grief Share, and the Grief Share in my community, to be honest, I love Grief Share. I really enjoy, I just kind of cried. Like I would just open the book and just read, and I would just kind of cry a little bit, and I would watch the videos, but I was going to group because, like I told y'all, I like being around the love of people who've experienced, but it was all older white folks who, when I mean, their stories were absolutely beautiful. I mean, they had spent 40, 50 years with their spouse, or a lot of them, I have met a lot of folks who had lost siblings who were, they were now the last of 5 kids. And that's hard when think I've never lost a sibling, but they were there because it's like, I am the only one left of all my siblings. So I met older white folks like that, older white folks who were processing losing their spouses who they had built these lives with, all under the Christian, faith and umbrella. But here I am, young Black girl sitting in a room trying to process grief around folks who don't have a lot of the same experiences as me culturally, and they're grieving in a way that is very evangelical white Jesus. I'm gonna just say it. That's what it really was. It was very evangelical white Jesus. So that was my struggle with trying to go the Christian route of grief healing first, or grief, not even grief healing, because there's like we know you go through grief. You don't just heal from grief, you experience grief. But I think there are phases of grief that you grow through, right? And you heal through. So I had a very regular therapist, like straight out the, like, I come to you and I talk about any and everything. And now we putting grief in this too. Like, I kept my regular therapist. I had Grief Share. I also joined one of the White Rose groups where it's all about people who've lost their mom, only, people who've experienced loss of their mom. So like, I felt like the church kind of let me down in terms of being a place that I could come to for this thing. I had to go to so many places that were not my church. But the one thing, Brittany said it too, my current pastor that I have now, I'm so grateful for him because he called me out, not in public to like everybody, but personally, he called me out and he said, he knew what I was feeling. My pastor does have a gift, and I'm a firm believer in his gift. But one day I was very much feeling that my mom was tearing heaven down for me, but something was getting in the way. And my pastor poured into me that same day, and he said, you have to understand that your mom can still be on your team. Because I was trying to, I keep telling God, let my mama rest. Like, I got this. Like, I keep trying to do it myself. And he really did pour into me that, like, your mama's physically gone, but you do know she has God's ear. And that was a reminder for me that like, my grief is also in relationship to my spiritual connection to God. My mother is in heaven, like those kind of things. So I do think in some ways my personal relationship with God and my pastor's connection has helped me in some ways with my grief. But for the most part, as the church as a whole, I was not able to find it at church.
Well, watching my father, me and my family attended the same church, was Pilgrim Baptist Church here in South Bend for pretty much the duration of my life. So watching I no longer attend, but watching my father attend church, and like Ms. Kerr said, there's not a lot of, I feel, outlets for mental health or anything like that in the church. And I feel I would have to agree with Shamika that, yeah, people do over spiritualize this grieving process, and they've done it to my father. My father has turned away. He no longer attends because it's too hard. And he really, so, you know, people come to church to find things, right? You know, spiritually. And he's searching for something, even in his old age. You know, he lost a vital part of himself. That was his best friend. So for me not attending and to watch him try to live his life and still keep in touch with God and still try to have this relationship and still try to go to church and worship, and he can't even do that because there is no support. It's really sad, and I really wish the church would have more outlets for mental health and things like this. At least somebody to talk to. We weren't as blessed to have a great clergy, you know, support system within our church. So, you know, we tried to seek some people out, and it's been a time. It's really been a time. But trying to find him that help, you know, trying to even find myself that help, you know, because I'm living vicariously through him because I'm watching. I left the church early because the way that they handled some things with my family before. So I've been away from the church some time, even when my mother had passed. And my mother was a believer, you know, she's the president of the choir, you know, head of the deacon board, all that type of stuff, and all the auxiliaries. So church is in her blood. She's been a church kid. But having to see her go through her experience through life being sick, and only people kind of fake love showing that they support her. You know, they want to pray for you and put hands on you and say these encouraging words, but after Sunday, where y'all at? After Bible study, y'all not here. So a couple things, there's a couple reasons I left my particular church, but that was one of the reasons, because I felt like we didn't, as people have no support, and other people are losing people and don't have the same support. So, you know, I really wish the church would just know, like you guys said, you know, we trying to get through it our own way, but please allow us a mental space to, if we're gonna come and worship, if we're gonna come and visit back to that spot that we used to seeing our people who passed that, just at least know, you know what I'm saying, support us, because it's we out here, y'all. We out here. And for people like my dad, it is really tough to watch him go through that. And I stay praying, but it's really tough. So I just wish we had more, you know, mental health outlets in church.
So when I'm thinking about over spiritualizing, I was trying to think of, okay, how do I really feel about that question? Because my initial response is, girl, yes. And then I had to really like, okay, let me think about that. The first thing that comes to mind is, one, grief is all throughout the Bible, right? So we see so many of the Bible characters and go through grief, you know, and then, but we also see them go through their process of lamenting to God and, you know, then coming out and having that joy and that gratitude and that peace and all of those different things. So in a way, you know, grief is a part of the spiritual journey, because we know that eventually it's inevitable. We're all going to experience it. So I don't really know that we can, in my opinion, over spiritualize it, because it's a part of the spiritual journey. What I feel like happens is that going back to, you know, slavery days, church and God was all they had. Like, right. So that was their source of hope out of their situation. And I feel sometimes we still feel like that's our only hope out of the situation. Now, bear with me, Christians. Don't be telling people that I said Jesus is not the way, the truth, and the life, because that's not what I'm saying, right? What I'm saying is that it's okay to have other resources in addition to having your faith and having God as well. I had a therapist for 3 years before my mother passed, and I continue to have that therapy. I also went to Grief Share, and it was older white people, you know, and I just was like, hey, where are the people that look like me at, you know? And I said that, you know, they couldn't help me because I really did enjoy Grief Share, but it's also something very different. So I feel like it's more of a lack of knowledge type situation with the Black church, that they don't necessarily know how to deal with the intensity that comes with grief. And so instead of picking up the tools to learn how to deal with it, it's sort of just kind of like, okay, call on Jesus, pray. And so that comes off as them over spiritualizing it, but it's really just lack of knowledge and not having the tools to equip, you know, the people to help someone through that process. And, you know, very similar to Cameron, like prior to my mom dying, I was already struggling with church anyway, because some things had went on and I was feeling some type of way. So I was struggling, and I remember my pastor, the pastor who I got saved under, you know, he was at the hospital. He was, you know, my home pastor. He was at the hospital with us when my mom passed. He was there to do my mom's funeral, my sister's funeral who had passed. He had literally been there throughout the entire process of every grief journey that I've had in my entire life. And I remember the year after my mom passed, he lost his son, and then he died in 2020. And that changed how I saw the church's experience with church. Because at first I was very much like Shamika, like, they weren't there, they didn't do nothing. And seeing him go through his own grief journey and then seeing him pass away really changed how I saw that. And I really was like, I really just feel like they don't have the knowledge or the tools to help us through it. And instead of admitting we don't have the knowledge and the tools, it's just kind of like, okay, well, go on and pray. The Lord gonna be with you. And it's like, we already know that, but give me something else. So, yeah.
All right. This is beautiful. Thank you all for your answers. I think I initially started off with the yes, the church over spiritualizes it. In some aspects, I feel like they do. But in my process and coaching and doing what I do, part of me and the reason why I wrote the book that I wrote is because I do believe we have the lack of education in the Black church. And our default response is always, oh, just pray about it. Oh, just fast, consecrate some more. Obviously, you're not spending enough time. That's just our default. It's our safety net. That's just what we automatically run to instead of trying to equip ourselves with the knowledge and the education on how we can actually be effective for those of us in our congregation who are dealing with grief and loss, which is how I ended up getting to what I do now with the whole education piece and teaching and things like that, which is another reason why we're doing tonight. I wanted it to be educational, you know, things of us sharing, in addition to us having a space of healing just for ourselves and sharing stories, because every time we share, at least for me, it brings about a level of healing, but also lending that education to those who are watching who may not have lost a mother, on how they can be supportive of those who have lost mothers, or people who have lost mothers, give the language on how to advocate for yourself. Because a lot of times we don't know how to advocate for ourselves because we're not given the knowledge on how to even handle or process the grief from the beginning, because we're just thrown all the cliche, safe, comfortable answers because of that lack of knowledge. So that's how we got to tonight. Thank you all so much for your time. We're just over an hour. I don't want to hold y'all all night on a Friday. It's Mother's Day weekend. And some of y'all be celebrating, so we're not. However, you're going to be spending the weekend. But thank y'all so much for being here. For everybody who tuned in, I pray that this was beneficial for you all. Please reach out if you have any questions or anything. My Instagram is open. My links for all my coaching and things like that, where you can get the book and the podcast and all that, is in my Instagram bio. I will be getting back to being more active on social media. Sis had to get through, pregnancy and all that. It was wearing me out. But we are back. So I will be back doing more of this helpful educational type things surrounding grief and loss, because I do want to normalize these conversations, because as believers, we do know that grief is inevitable. We have to keep bringing it to the forefront so that it's not taboo. So thank you all for joining us on a Friday night. And we will see y'all next time. Bye.
Appreciate you.